Welcome to our adult class. We are in Revelation chapter 13. We will begin our study at verse 11. Revelation chapter 13, verse 11. Let's read verse 11 down through the rest of the chapter, and then we'll begin discussing this section. Revelation 13, verse 11, beginning. And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. And he exercised all the power of the first beast before him, and causeth the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. And he doth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men, and deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth, that they should make an image to the beast, which had the wound by a sword, and did live. And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak, and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. Back in verse 11, we are introduced to a second beast that John sees. And maybe I do myself a disservice by constantly saying this, but I know there's a lot of repetition in this. But this is the vision that John is seeing. And he sees this second beast coming up out of the earth. It has two horns like a lamb, but yet he spake as a dragon. So we understand this is not deity here. This is another worker of Satan. Who exactly does it have reference to? There's a lot of different people with different thoughts and theories. Many people believe it has to do with the courts or the government of the Roman the council, I guess is the proper term to use, of the Roman government. But regardless, it's another enemy. And this enemy here is going to be a deceiving one. Many people would be deceived. Look at verse 12. And by the way, if you have a comment or you want to ask a question, interrupt me. I don't take offense to that. It's your class. We all learn together. But verse 12, and he exerciseth all the power of the first beast before him, and causeth the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. And I think this is what leads some people to believe they had to do with the council of the Rome. But regardless, these two, the first beast we talked about in the first couple of verses of the chapter, and now the second beast, are certainly related. They're combined in whatever sense, and that is, of course, to destroy mankind, an enemy to Christians. That much we know. Now, verse 13 and 14, I think bears some discussion, because when you read these verses, certainly they are deceiving, but the word miracle is used. All right, now pay attention to that. Let's read these two verses together, and then I want us to go back and consider this. Verse 13, and he doth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men. Verse 14, and deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth, that they should make an image to the beast, which had the wound by a sword, and did live. So here we find that this beast has the ability to deceive. Now, what does it mean in verse 14, and he deceiveth? What does it mean to be deceived? right, to not tell the truth. It means to, and if it's deceived, meaning I'm on the other end of that, I am deceived, it means that I've been misled. Thank you. It means to be lied to be tricked. Yes. So this beast, whatever it is, had the ability, or was in the process, if you will, of deceiving many people, of lying to people, tricking people, not telling them the truth. And what was the deception? That was that they should worship the beast. They should fall down before the beast. And that's the first beast that we talked about earlier in the chapter, which I think most everyone, as a commentator, realizes that was Domitian and some others who were claiming deity, and the people had to bow down to them. Ted. Yeah, well said. And last week, if you were in the class, I talked about for a moment some of the things that Rome was talking about Christianity, that they were atheists, that we, Christians, were atheists. Why? And I mentioned this last week. Because we wouldn't worship other gods, only Jehovah. And therefore they viewed us as atheists. In other words, we didn't believe in God, which is not true. And then cannibalism, because of the Lord's Supper, teaching or telling other people, those Christians, well, they believe in eating others, which was nonsense. And I told you I'd forgotten the last one, which was a powerful one. They pushed this concept that Jesus was a convicted person who was such a vile person that society crucified him. In other words, you follow that criminal? And that criminal being, they said Jesus was, the Jews had accused him of all these things. And crucifixion in the day was the most, let me rephrase that. It was the punishment reserved for the worst of the worst. I mean, if you were not a good man, you committed some crime, you would be punished under Roman law. But crucifixion was set aside for the worst of criminals. And imagine, here I am striving to live as a Christian. Oh, you follow a person that the government actually crucified? See the shame that they were heaping on those people who were following Christ? And there were other reasons too, but it was on the top of, I just couldn't get it out last week. But again, atheists and cannibals, and following someone like that? So Ted is right. I think they were deceiving the people by this type of propaganda that they were putting upon Christians in the day. And here was this second beast, if it be, and I'll just say that because I'm not sure, but if it be the council of Rome, the leaders other than the emperor of Rome, doing these things, but they had deceived people. Now, verse 14, this deception, look at this. It says, and deceive them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast. I have an opinion, and this is simply David's opinion, okay? I have a difficult time believing that Satan had the ability, working through these other individuals, to perform legitimate miracles. I realize that through the sleight of hand and so many other things, some people can do some amazing things. We've all seen things on TV or whatever. Maybe it's, I call it card sharks. You've seen individuals, pick this card. Let me tell you what that is. And, you must have some miraculous insight, some knowledge to be able to do that. Does anyone here believe that it's miraculous? No, it is certainly a sleight of a hand. Excuse me, I can't understand how they do such, but I do believe there's ways of doing that. You've seen magicians, and they do something, act as if they're pulling something out of a child's ear. Are they really doing that? No, of course not. And again, were they deceiving others? Absolutely. But go back with me historically for a moment. And we read about others who had the abilities to deceive. Just turn to Acts 8. I think that's one of the good examples here. Acts chapter 8, or I'll turn and read it if you don't want to turn there yourself. I'll read it in your hearing. Acts chapter 8 and verse 9. And we're talking about Simon the sorcerer here. Let me read to you a few verses. Acts 8 verse 9. But there was a certain man called Simon, which before time in the same city used sorcery, and bewitched the people of Samaria, giving out that himself was some great one, to whom they all gave heed from the least to the greatest, saying, This man is the great power of God. And to him they had regard, because that of a long time he had bewitched them with sorceries. Did Simon have unique abilities to perform miracles? I don't think so at all. Matter of fact, let me read a few more verses here. But when they believed Philip preaching the things concerning the kingdom of God in the name of Jesus Christ, they were baptized, both men and women. Then Simon himself believed also. And when he was baptized, he continued with Philip and wondered, beholding the miracles and signs which were done. Later on, he even requests, if you will, verse 18, when Simon saw that through laying on of the apostles' hands the Holy Ghost was given, he offered them money, saying, Give me this power also, that on whomsoever I lay hands, he may receive the gift, or may receive the Holy Ghost. This man realized true miracles when he saw them. He knew he was deceiving the people. But the point is, they gave regard, verse 11 says, they gave, respect that he was some great one of God. He was a deceiver. He didn't have such abilities. The point, what was the purpose of miracles in the first century? Yes. And to me, if Satan truly had the ability, you and I are living in the first century, okay? We don't have the New Testament written. I can't look over, now Paul said in the book of, I don't have that ability. I don't have even the book of Acts. I don't have Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. I don't have any of that. If you remember when John the Baptist later, as I recall, I think he was in prison at the time. Now he had met Jesus. Matter of fact, he had baptized him. Matthew chapter 3. But later, John, I think, is in prison at the time, and he sends his disciples because Jesus is now out. He's in his public ministry. And John sends these messengers to Jesus saying, Are you the one? And how did Jesus confirm that? He said, Go back and tell them the blind see, the lame walk. In other words, here's this miraculous evidence. In Mark chapter 16, in verse 20, the last verse of the book, Mark 16, verse 20, they went forth and preached everywhere, the Lord working with them, and confirming the word with signs following. So that was the purpose of miracles. You read the early book of Acts. Let me just go through some of this because I think it's important. In Acts chapter 4, verse 30, and we could look at a lot of verses like this. Peter, as I recall in context, by stretching forth thine hand to heal, and that signs and wonders may be done by the name of thy holy child Jesus. And in other words, he says, this is done by his authority, and this was Nicodemus. I keep rambling, jumping everywhere with you, but in John chapter 3, or chapter 4, I guess it is. No, it is chapter 3. I apologize. John, go back. Chapter 3, verse 1. There was a man of the Pharisees named Nicodemus, a ruler of the Jews. The same came to Jesus by night and said unto him, Rabbi, we know that thou art a teacher come from God. For no man can do these miracles that thou doest, except God be with him. So, even though I may not have all this knowledge, if I were living in the first century, and I saw Jesus raise Lazarus from the grave, he had been dead for several days. His body had already begun to decay. Speaking, in other words, there's an odor there. No, don't roll this tomb back. Don't unbind him. Yeah, that would have had a great impact. I would say, well, I need to listen to this man. He is speaking from God. No man can do those miracles except God be with him, as did Nicodemus say. So, in my view, again, the book of Revelation is a symbolic book. It's not to be taken in a literal sense. So when I read this, that this second beast had performed miracles, if you will, in the legitimate way, I just don't think that's the case. And that's the reason. Verse 14, and deceiveth them, misled them, lied to them, tricked them, and deceived them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had the power to do. Do I believe that there were some sleight of hand, even go back to verse 13. So he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men. I don't know what that was, but it is, I think, evident that men had the ability to deceive others. And if I understand it correctly, that's what's going on here. I just don't think that Satan had given these, whoever it may be, miraculous abilities. Ted.
You look back to the power, the limited power that Satan had to judge.
Yes.
You look at the Roman government and those people, and I think, just like draw a comparison to today, our government, or many people in our government, have that love of money and love of power and greed, and they try to deceive us to maintain that. Rome was doing the same thing, and they may have used natural occurrences or something along those lines, even that Satan was active in whatever way, and used that as part of their deception.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah, very well. That could be. I know I'm odd. My wife tells me that I'm odd. But you going to say something, Ted?
Well, I mean, just the fact that maybe Satan did not perform miracles, or his workers did not perform miracles, but people are gullible, and people want to believe in things, but they also want to believe in things that do not require them to be obedient. People cannot maybe want it, just like today. I want to be religious. I want to be a part of religion, but I do not want to force my life into the guidelines that the Bible dictates. So I'll go over here and I'll listen to Pastor John or whoever that claims whatever, and that makes me feel good, you know. And so I tell other people, oh, he can do this, he can do that. The Roman government, they wanted, you know, whatever, so they might say, oh, look, Rome did this or Rome did that, or they have this power.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. When I was saying I was kind of odd, have you ever thought about Christopher Columbus? Everybody, who is he? Who's Christopher Columbus? What was he given credit for? All right. Have you ever studied about his life? It's I like to go back and look at not just something that was said that he did, but I'm pretty sure that it was Christopher Columbus that I was reading about the occasion. But nevertheless, he does get a lot of credit, a lot of glory, if you will, for the discovering the Americas as it was supposed to have done. And of course, with that information, gets a lot of support from his home country to go back and lead other expeditions and find other lands, etc., etc. Well, he utterly failed in many respects. And in one of his voyages toward the end of his life, he had led these ships out, and they couldn't find what they were looking for, and there was a mutiny. And I don't know if you're aware of this, but back in the day, the ships, the wooden ships as they used, had a lifespan. And there was a certain, I don't remember what it was, but actually the aquatic insects began to bore into the wooden hulls of the ship, and before long it becomes porous. You're sinking. And it came to that point that he, after his ship had just basically sank, that they found an island there, and that there were native people living there. Well, at first they treated him very kindly, but it wasn't long. Of course, he had been exiled from another place, but regardless, it wasn't long till the native people began to turn against him. So if you're a mariner, back in the day, they didn't have GPS. How did they navigate? By the stars. If you're a mariner, you have studied the solar system, and he knew a great deal about it. And he knew the time of year that eclipse was coming up very near. And he knew the time. Okay? So to convince the native people that he was a special person, he said the gods are going to show their displeasure because you haven't been feeding us properly. The gods are going to show you their displeasure. Tomorrow at this time, he's going to darken the land. Now, who has that ability to darken the sun? It has to be a god, right? But he told them that. And what happens the next day, it starts to get dimmer there, and during this eclipse, as the moon, however that works, passes, in between the sun, and so they come back bowing down to him, and they're now bringing him all this food every day, and he's living it up. Had he committed a miracle? Did he have power? He only had knowledge. But he used that to his advantage, to deceive people, to trick them, as you've said before, lied to them, that he was some great person and that his God would show their displeasure tomorrow. You'll see it. I just thought that was interesting, how that a man can use knowledge and deceive ignorant people, ignorant being those native people, because they had no idea. And I guess I would have been about like them. I had no idea an eclipse was coming, or would have known, I should have said. You get the point. But I don't, again, this is me, and maybe I'm wrong. I just don't believe that God granted Satan these miracles, that these people had the ability to produce miracles, because how could they be innocent? Later on, he said, they're going to lead so many people to follow the beast and to bow down before him, meaning, Rome and follow that which is evil. How could they be held unaccountable if they were truly, if just like Jesus came when he performed these miracles? Hope you see what I'm saying. I think it was simply deception, and often you could go back, and I put a lot of this in my notes here. 2 Thessalonians 2, 9 through 12, Paul talks about, Satan through his deceptive works and means leading people astray. And I think that's the idea here. Verse 15. And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, and the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. I do believe this goes back to Rome giving these decrees that if you don't fall down and worship the emperor, you're going to be put to death. As we said time and again, that's why Christians had basically gone underground in their worship and so on, to hide, to conceal their worship during this period, because that was it was death. And many saints had been killed. That's evident. Verse 16, and he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads. I don't believe, again, this is a literal mark. We'll talk more about that in verse 18. But it is clear that laws were passed that if you don't follow the emperor of Rome, if you don't bow down, if you don't give praise and obeisance to the Roman emperor, you're not going to be able to work. You're not going to, how do we know? We're going to give you this mark. Literal? I don't think it was literal myself. But I do think it was recognition that you can't go out and buy and sell. Much like the Third Reich there in Germany did to the Jews. Before they actually started putting them in concentration camps, they said, you don't go to the ghetto here. You don't do business. If it's a Jew, you stop doing business with them. And then, of course, it just escalated from there. But that would have brought hardships upon them, and that's what its purpose was. And that was what it is here, I believe. And, of course, it's kind of interesting. With the Jews, did they receive a physical mark? They had tattooed numbers on their, on their arm? I know they were to wear an armband to the left arm, but they had, numbers tattooed on them, regardless. Verse 17, that no man might buy or sell save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. And then here's verse 18. It is my opinion that most people in the religious world know about two verses of the Bible. They know nothing else. The first is John 3:16. And I truly believe they misimplied. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. Is that a wonderful verse? Yeah, indeed.
Most people misquote it. They say shall, not
Yeah.
should.
That's true. But it's misapplied is what I'm saying. What a beautiful verse that God loved the world, sent Jesus to die for the world, and that we must believe him. There's no question about that, or we can't be saved. But they take that one verse. Pardon? Well, that's what he said in John 14:15, and many other places. That's right. Mike? Yeah, I don't know if the right word is charged, but it bothers me when I see it on some vehicles here in Carter County, and you've seen them too, maybe on the bumper sticker or tailgate or back of a van or whatever, and there'll be probably two verses on there, or three, John 3:16 and Romans 10, verse 9 and 10. Okay, good. What about all the rest of them? What about all the other passages? And, of course, what those verses teach is a quote-unquote support of the idea of being saved by faith only. But, indeed, the sum of God's Word is true. But I was saying, making the point, I think there's two verses that most people in the religious world would know of, and one is John 3:16, which is misapplied in my opinion, and the second is verse 18 of the book of Revelation. 666, the mark of the beast. I mentioned this before, but I was getting something at a convenience store years ago, and this lady, anyway, it come out to be $6.66, and she put her hand over her mouth, and she said no. She said, and she got real quick. She got her little pocketbook out, and she got another penny. She said, "Let me give you back an extra penny." And I said, "Ma'am, this doesn't bother me. It's 666. It's the mark of the beast. Surely you know that." Read it, verse 18. "Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. 60, as most all of you know, 20 times, that's a score. 3 times 20 is 6. So it's 666. And I've heard people say, well, that's these barcodes. That's Satan. Now, if you do any shopping now, you know about barcodes. As you have, even Connie and I went to Walmart yesterday, and I supported her. She did most all this. But anyway, you know, you have to put the little barcode up there. It'll go beep when it reads it or whatever. You're all familiar with that. But everything's, you know, commerce has to do with barcodes now. And other people say, no, it's your Social Security number. Everyone's America, you know, you have your own Social Security. That's what it is. That's the 666. That's how they're going to track you and so on. Well, do I believe that these people literally had something tattooed on their forehead or on their arm, and it was this number 666? I don't think this was to be taken literally. It was figuratively simply saying Satan knows his own. Those people who worship him, those people who are going to be buying and selling. And once more, the context, Rome was trying to stamp out this undesirable religion of Christianity. That was their view at least. And they're trying to force them into worshiping the emperor. They're trying to force them out of common. We'll starve you out if we can't kill you out. And again, this was the idea that was being presented. But I really think that's two verses that most people can tell you where 666 is found in the book of Revelation. But this is the passage. And the mark of the beast, I hear that all the time. Okay, next chapter, and we may get into it, started at least this morning. In the next chapter, Babylon's going to fall. There's a difference. Here's one scene. The next scene is going to show you how Babylon, and he's talking about, of course, not the nation of Babylon. Babylon had already fallen a long time ago, but how Babylon, and I think it was in the form of Rome, we'll discuss that then, it was fallen. But that's what we've seen thus far in chapter 13. Any comments further about chapter 13? It'll bring problems to me. Cause me problems. Well, I think so, and you communicate what I was trying to much better at times. But that is, I think, the idea, not that it was a literal stamping, so to speak, but yet that is something that we hear so much about today. 666, the mark of the beast. Chapter 14, I've only got about 3 minutes or so. Let's read the first 5 verses. I'll give you a bit of an introduction. Then later in the book, we'll let me just stop there. We'll start with verse 1, and we'll read the first 5 verses. And I looked, and lo, a Lamb stood on the Mount Zion, and with him 144,000, having his Father's name written in their foreheads. And I heard a voice from heaven, as the voice of many waters, and as the voice of a great thunder. And I heard the voice of harpers harping with their harps. They sung as it were a new song before the throne, and before the 4 beasts and the elders, and no man could learn that song but the 144,000 which were redeemed from the earth. These are they which were not defiled with women, for they are virgins. These are they which follow the Lamb whithersoever he goeth. These were redeemed from among men, being the firstfruits unto God and to the Lamb. and in their mouth was found no guile, for they are without fault before the throne of God. We'll give a bit of introduction to this. We again find the phrase or the number here, basically 144,000. We saw that back in chapter 7, verse 4, where God there talked about, or the book of Revelation just depicts the 144,000. And again, we see this number. Is it an exact number that only 144,000 are going to be saved or that's redeemed? I don't believe that at all. We talked about it before. We had the 12 tribes of Israel. We had the 12 apostles. The number 12 is prominent. The 144,000, I think, had reference to God's people. That's all I really know to say about it. I don't think it has anything significant beyond the description of God's people. Anyone would like to make a different or further comment about that? Verse 2, he says, I heard a voice from heaven as the voice of many waters. What do you make of that phrase? If you're describing, you're John, you see this vision, you hear this voice, it's coming from heaven, and it's like the voice of many waters. Yes. I've been fortunate in my life to see some things. I have seen Niagara Falls. Probably a lot of you have seen them as well. I've also saw one of the other 7 wonders of the world, the falls there, kind of at the border of Zimbabwe and Zambia, some of those countries coming together. I had the name of it on the tip of my tongue, and I'm trying to remember it. It's considered one of the wonders of the world, though. But anyway, it's where several waterfalls come together from different directions and fall into this valley. And, we think of what John said, the voice of many waters here. There's a roar there. I've never experienced a hurricane. I've never been on the beach during a hurricane, but I can imagine having been to the ocean a few times. Some of you ladies talked about, who go to the beach maybe a whole lot often than I do, but these waves pounding the beach head. You're laying there, I can just lay there and sleep listening to the waves hit the sand. But can you imagine many waters coming together? Not Ruby Falls. What was the name of that? It just bothers me. I can't remember that. But it would be loud. Even here in these hilly mountains during a storm. Back was it 98 when we had the terrible floods here in the county and some people lost their lives? If you remember, they had the heavy snows up on top of the Rhone and other places, and all of a sudden a very warm rain, a lot of rain came and then flooded. But if you were in a creek area that was flooded, it's loud. You could actually hear the boulders being moved and this rushing water as would come rushing through. But that's what he hears, this voice. It's like of many waters, as the voice of a great thunder. John's trying to describe this. He's putting this in terms for us. It had to be and I think Ted hit the idea there exactly. It's powerful, is what is being portrayed. The voice of many waters, the voice of a great thunder. And I heard the voice of harpers harping with their harps. Interesting concept of this thundering sound, and yet the voice of harpers harping with their harps. What do? Verse 3. And they sung as it were a new song before the throne, before the 4 beasts and the elders. And no man could learn that song but the 144,000 which were redeemed from the earth. So only they could sing this song. What's the significance of that in your opinion? Any ideas? Yeah, don't take this literal that here's a song, well, my mouth just won't work. I just can't, form the words. I can't form these syllables in my mouth because I'm not a Christian. Don't take this literal. It was the idea that Christians are different. We are separate from the world. I think that's all it had reference to. They're singing this beautiful song, and it's a song that only Christians can sing. Well, again, we are set apart from the world. In my view, that's the idea. Not that, as I said, their mouth just wouldn't form these syllables. No. They were different. They were distinct. They were sanctified. The word sanctify means they were set apart. That, I think, is the idea. And my time is up. I've actually probably gone over a little bit, but if that clock is correct anyway. Yes. Yes, thank you. Has any of you seen Victoria Falls? It really is an amazing thing, because you have water coming from different ways and all these cliffs, and there's water and this mist coming up from the valley. It is an amazing sight. Anyway, but thank you. Yes, it was Victoria Falls. All right, we're going to pick this up about verse 4, Lord willing, next week. Thank you for your participation.